Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study through the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are in Exodus chapter 14, and we're now going to see one of the last, I should say, not acts, but miracles and wonders that God would do to once and for all cripple Egypt. Let me say this too, because as we said, as we've been watching the plagues that God has been afflicting on Egypt, what has been interesting is, on the one hand, you see God hardening Pharaoh's heart, but then you see Pharaoh hardening his own heart. So there's always been sort of this kind of question here: who's doing what, right? In other words, does Pharaoh have any kind of responsibility? Because after all, God is the one who is hardening his heart. And I think when we look at things like, as far as answering for God, I don't, especially when He doesn't make something as plain in Scripture. But we can say for sure that Pharaoh is culpable because he hardened his heart instead of surrendering from God. And the reason why I say that is because everywhere you see where a person humbled themselves before God, God has always been merciful. Everywhere. There's not one example where a person humbles himself before God and God says, no, I'm not. And keep that in mind. I said, where a person humbles himself. Even one of the most wickedest king, Manasseh, humbles himself. After all of the evil he did, he still humbled himself. And God had mercy on him, even though he didn't turn back his judgment against Israel. So, with that, this we're going to see. This is, of course, the Great Red Sea Experience. So let's get into it. All right. Oh, all right. Chapter 14, verse 1. Is that the Lord spoke to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, turn back and camp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Midgal and the sea. You must camp in front of Baal Zephon, facing it by the sea." So in other words, now, by the way, God is purposely leading the Israelites there. He's purposely leading them here. Verse 3, Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, "They are wandering around the land in confusion, and the wilderness has boxed them in. I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them. Then I will receive glory by means of Pharaoh and all of his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh." So the Israelites did this. Now, remember the first meeting, Pharaoh said, "I don't know this God you're talking about." Well, he's getting to know him quite well. Verse 5, when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their mind about the people and said, "What have we done? Who's going to clean our toilets? Who's going to cook our meals?" Right? He says, "We have released Israel from serving us." So he got his chariot ready and took his troops with him. He took 600 of the best chariots and all the rest of the chariots of Egypt, with the officers in each one. The Lord hardened the hearts of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites who were going out triumphantly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and his horsemen and his army, chased after them and caught up with them as they camped at the sea by Pi-hahiroth. Again, forgive me for, I don't know if I'm pronouncing these names right. He said in front of Baal Zephon. And as And as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and saw the Egyptians coming after them. And then the Israelites were terrified and cried out to the Lord for help. And they said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Isn't this what we told you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." Now this is a foreshadowing here. This is a foreshadowing of what is to come with the Israelites. Okay, so just keep this in mind. This is a foreshadowing. If you go back, let's remember, God, we open up Exodus with God appearing to Moses in chapters 2, I think chapter 3. And remember, he appears to Moses and said, "I've heard the cry of my people." So let's just stop for that. They were crying out. They were in misery. The Egyptians were mistreating them harshly. And God responded. So I want you to keep this in mind because this will be their downfall. They keep saying this, right? Wouldn't it have been better if we stayed in Egypt? Well, when you were in Egypt, you kept crying out to God about your misery, how badly they were treating you. Now they also said that, remember, when they said, "Well, didn't we tell you this?" Because remember after the first encounter, Pharaoh made it even harder, making them go out and get their own straw to make their own bricks. But look, they saw how God broke down the Egyptians. That's what's kind of amazing here. Yeah, we had hardships, but you also saw how God, as he said, crippled them. You marched out. You plundered them. All right, so this is a foreshadowing right here of the wickedness in their hearts, that they will never ever, this generation, this first generation, they will never get over this. Verse 13, but Moses said to the people, "Don't be afraid, stand firm and see the Lord's salvation. He will provide for you today. For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You must be quiet." Now also, just so you know, when it says the Lord will fight for you, just file that in the back of your mind, because this is going to be something that's a prophetic voice. When it says in the prophecies that the Lord will go out to battle and fight for you as he did in the day of battle. This is one of the beginnings of that. Verse 15, the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to break camp. As for you, lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground." In other words, why are you talking to me? Go out that way. And by the way, remember, God had already prepared them for this. This is not something kind of new. He told them this is what he's going to do. Verse 17, "I'm going to harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will receive glory by means of Pharaoh, all of his army and his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I receive glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who was going in front of the Israelite forces, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from the front of them and stood behind them. And it came between the Egyptians and the Israelites' forces. The cloud was there in the darkness, yet it lit up the night. So neither groups came near the other all night long. Now, what is amazing again is that notice their unbelief. While this cloud, this pillar of fire is there, but notice we now see it as the angel of the Lord that was kind of in this pillar of fire. And they're going to have this, that this pillar in the daytime, remember, it was a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. They had this whole generation. And yet you're going to see the hardness of their heart, which is unbelievable. But think about Pharaoh. If I'm Pharaoh, if I'm the soldiers, and all of a sudden we advance upon them, bad enough, you've been humiliated, defeated, the nation is crippled, you harden your heart, and then you still march out, and you still say, well, I'm going to destroy the Israelites, right? Now, I want you to think about that. I'm going to destroy them. So as you're marching forward towards them, all of a sudden this pillar of fire stands between you and the Israelites' camp. If I'm the Egyptians, how is it that I'm not looking at that? How come I don't say, this is some strange stuff going on here. Maybe we should rethink this. And as I said, in our journey through the Bible, one of the things we will constantly see is that the sinfulness of man is exceedingly sinful. We will constantly see that. And it is unbelievable. The sinfulness of man. And if you skip to the book of Revelations, you will also see that the man of sin, the beast, will come against Jesus. He will be destroyed. And what's amazing is one of the last acts of sinful man is after 1,000 years of Jesus, they will rebel against him and will be destroyed. I pray for God's mercy that sinfulness never overtakes me like that. And this shows you that it doesn't matter the miracles you see. Now, oftentimes people think, how come God doesn't just show them a miracle? Here was a miracle. They saw the plagues. They saw this pillar of fire that prevented them from attacking the Israelites from the rear. They saw the miracles. But it is deeper than that. It is this sinful nature in our hearts. And I'm thankful for God for his mercy through Jesus. Because I don't want that. That is something that, think about this right here. And remember, it's not like they're deceived. They are fighting against the God of the Israelites. Keep that in mind. They know exactly what they're doing. All right. Verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back with a powerful east wind all that night and turned the sea into dry land. So the waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on their right and on their left. Now, this is a kind of interesting because some people try to say, well, it was no big miracle. It was just, and we're going to actually see this. We're going to actually see this actually when Israel even crosses the Jordan. And throughout time, they will cross the Jordan. And they cross the Jordan when it's on the low, on the low tide, right? And but they crossed it wet. But notice here, they crossed the Red Sea. It was a wall. So they're going into the depths of the Red Sea. So God parts the Red Sea, makes a wall, and then right in the midst of where they're walking is dry ground. Right? So if you just divided the Red Sea, you would see mud. In fact, it would be so muddy you couldn't even travel through that. Right? But God dried the land, and then they walk through this Red Sea. We don't know how wide the part was, but it was all dry land. Now you would think, again, they would see that and say, you know what? We this is not working for us. We better get out of here. Woo. All right. Verse 23. The Egyptians set out in pursuit. And Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen went into the sea after them. And during the morning watch, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian forces from the pillar of the fire and the cloud and threw them into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve and made them drive with difficulty. Let's get away from Israel, the Egyptians said, because Yahweh is fighting for them against Egypt. A little too late. A little too late. Verse 26. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may come back on the Egyptians and on their chariots and their horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal depth, while the Egyptians were trying to escape from it. And the Lord threw them into the sea, and the waters came back and covered the chariots and the horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had gone after them into the sea, and none of them survived. So Pharaoh and his armies were all destroyed. They were drowned. But the Israelites had walked through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on their right and on their left. Now, one of the things about this too, and I think is worth let me you know what, I'll finish this off. Verse 29 again. But the Israelites had walked through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on the right hand and on the left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the power of the Egyptians. And the Egyptians saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore, so their bodies began to wash up. When Israel saw the great power of the Lord that the Lord used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and believed in him and in his servant Moses. Now, unfortunately, that won't last. This will be very, very short-lived, as we will see here. My point is, you can't help but see, right? I mean, if you stop and think about it, you can't help but believe once you see this. But I want you to understand, too, that the Egyptians' punishment and judgment was all due because of their hardness of heart, their obstinance to sin against God. This is what is amazing here. And we can look at this and say, now, was God cruel? No, God was just. Because think about this, of all the times that he gave them to surrender. Now, as we move forward with this, we're going to see other nations will humble themselves. People and nations will say, hey, you guys, your God is God. So the Egyptians, while they fell into judgment, okay, I think this is what we're going to see. God is just. His judgments are just. We happen to get more information here. And keep this in mind, we happen to get information. And God has given us a behind the scenes look. And so when people try to accuse God of being cruel, understand you don't have all the facts. We have all the facts here. And the only thing you can say is that God is just for this. God is just just. All right, guys, chapter 15 in the next study. I will see you then.